Okay, so got another Nissan in here with a K21 engine, right? And the symptom or the customer complaint is that it would start up, but it would readily die. So it starts up quick, but it just starts right away, no acceleration whatsoever. Uh, got no code. So let me crank it. Right, so no codes. So you see right now it's dying. But even if I try to rev it up, it just died. Start it again. Now it's up right away. No response, nothing, right? And then it just slowly dies. Okay. A bit of history. If you see the LPG regulator, it has been replaced by a new one by another company. So I guess they were thinking it was fuel related, right? But if you can see, it starts up. So that means to say I have fuel. But the question is it enough fuel? So let's do this. Let's take away the gearbox, right? And got a can of brake clean here. So what I'm gonna do is, am I losing fuel or am I in excess of fuel? So brake clean again. So let's start it. Starts up. Wait a bit. So I can keep it running. Okay, and I'm guessing they did the same test. So once I took out the brake clean, right, it dies. So I'm guessing they did the same test, and that's why they figured, okay, you know what, fuel issue, let's replace the regulator. Now, the thing is, could it be my injector that's faulting out? So I know I'm losing fuel. The other question is the computer responsible for reducing the amount of fuel? Which might very well be. Now at startup, there's no feedback from the oxygen sensor yet because the ECT or the engine is not hot enough yet. The sensors that the computer is looking at for sure is going to be mass airflow, air temperature sensor, right? And of course throttle angle. So here's a quick and dirty test. Because I'm thinking it's going to be the mass airflow, or at least the air intake temperature sensor, but they're in the same package. So this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna start it up, disconnect this, and it keeps on running. And you can see that the engine is revving higher now. It's not dying. Right, so quick and dirty test. I know the problem is right here because right now the computer is running on a program. But of course, if you disconnect that, that's one of the major sensors that it's looking at. It will not let you rev up. Alright? It will not let you rev up because it doesn't know the amount of air that's coming in or even the temperature of air coming in. I'm more confident now in replacing that sensor. We're going to order the sensor and then we're going to try out the new sensor and see what happens. Okay, so new mass airflow sensor is in. Try to start it up. You can already hear the difference, right? Rev it up. Alright, so this one, we can call this one a fix, but because we have the old one, what I'm going to do is try to get reference waveforms or readings from the old one and try to figure out what exactly went wrong. Okay, so hooked up the oscilloscope to the new sensor, channel A. Alright, so settings for the oscilloscope is 10 volts per division or max, and then 1 second per division on the time base. Okay, let's run this, see what we get. This is on the new sensor, so we're going to use this as a reference moving forward. Key on, cranking. Okay, that's idling right now. What I'm going to do is rev it up a couple times. Okay, one. Okay, they kill it. That's a reading. Okay, gonna stop this and look at what we get. Okay, so this is the capture that we got out of the brand new mass airflow sensor. Of course, this is key off still. Key on. Went up to 6 volts right here, and then it stabilized at 0.567 millivolts. And at this point is where we started cranking. You see the humps here. Let's try to zoom in a bit. So this would be each cylinder going through its stroke, through its cycles. Alright, and this part is where the engine actually started running. It started right here. So this would be considered as idling. We have a reading of 2.192 volts at this point. Okay, zoom out, then go to the next frame. Continues on, about the same, so roughly 2 volts at idling. And this part is where we tried to snap it. So the maximum reading at that point is about 4.228, 4.25. So snapping it, and then goes back to idle again at about 2 volts. Moving over to the next frame is where we keyed off, turn off here, and then 0.5 again, and then power was actually taken away from the mass airflow sensor, went back to 0. Alright, so that would be the reference waveform now that I would be using moving forward when testing mass airflow sensors. But of course, I know there's going to be a difference between engine to engine. Variables such as intake restrictions and exhaust restrictions, back pressure, of course, because this is the amount of air that the engine is able to take in. So those variables are going to change the readings of the mass airflow for sure. So I think it's best that before doing this, we actually take a vacuum gauge to our engine just to see if our engine is really breathing properly. So now I put in the old sensor back, same connections. All right, oscilloscope hooked up. Let's run this. Okay, so now it's key on. Then crank it. Alright, then we try to rev it up. That's it. And it dies. So as you can see, there was a big difference on the reading from the new one, right? And the defective one. So first of all, the reading, a key on, I don't think it's going to be much different. But here's the thing. I don't see the humps here. Let's explode this a bit. See, the humps in here when it was cranking is not as prominent. And when it's idling already, let's see what reading we got. So at idling, it went up to like 1.5. So 1.5 when it was idling. And if you were just using a meter, and if we follow the book, alright, so this is the book, the airflow sensor. It says on the book, at cranking 1.5, at idling, after warming up, 1.3. Alright, so 1.5 at cranking. And as you can see, that's 1.5 there. So, I don't know. If you were just using a meter on this and not looking at the waveform and how it's reacting to the amount of air that's coming in, I mean, I would think that you would test out and say that that mass airflow would be good. See, 1.5, I mean, it's there at idling. So I think the best way still, looking at the oxygen sensor, is getting a reference waveform if you are able to use an oscilloscope. But other than that, the first test that we did, unplugging the mass airflow to see if it runs any better should be a good test to at least get direction to replace that mass airflow.